You said visual thinking. I wonder if you've seen parallels of the different styles and kinds of thinking that that operate the minds of these people. So, is there parallels you see between Elon, Steve Jobs, Einstein, Da Vinci, specifically in how they think?
I think they were all visual thinkers,
Visual.
perhaps coming from slight handicaps as children, meaning, Leonardo was left-handed and a little bit dyslexic, I think. Um, and certainly Einstein had echolalia. He would repeat things. He was slow in learning to talk. So I think visualizing helps a lot. And with Musk, I see it all the time when I'm walking the factory lines with him or in product development, where he'll look at, say, the heat shield under the Raptor engine of a Starship booster. And he'll say, why does it have to be this way? Couldn't we trim it this way or make it, or even get rid of this part of it? And he can visualize the material science. There's a small anecdotes in my book, but at one point he's on the Tesla line and they're trying to get 5,000 cars a week in 2018.
Mhm.
It's a life or death situation. And he's looking at the machines that are bolting something to the chassis. And he insists that that Lars Moravy, one of his great lieutenants, come and they have to summon him. And he says, why are there 6 bolts here? And Lars and others explain, well, for the crash tests or anything else, the pressure would be in this way, so you have to. And they were blah, 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 blah. And he said, no, if you visualize it, you'll see if there's a crash, the force would go this way and that way. And it could be done with 4 bolts. Now, that sounds risky, and they go test it and they engineer it, but it turns out to be right. I know that seems minor, but I could give you 500 of those, where in any given day, he's visualizing the physics of an engineering or manufacturing problem. That sounds pretty mundane. But for me, if you say, what makes him special? There's a mission-driven thing. I give you a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons is he cares not just about the design of the product, but visualizing the manufacturing and of the product, the machine that makes the machine. And that's what we failed to do in America for the past 40 years. We outsource so much manufacturing. I don't think you can be a good innovator if you don't know how to make the stuff you're designing. And that's why Musk puts his designer's desk right next to the assembly lines in the factories so that they have to visualize what they drew as it becomes the physical object.
So understanding everything from the physics all the way up to the software, so like end to end.
Well, having an end-to-end control is important. Certainly with Steve Jobs. I'm looking at my iPhone here. It's a big deal. That hardware only works with Apple software. And for a while, the iTunes store, it only works, so he has an end-to-end that makes it like a Zen garden in Kyoto, very carefully curated, but a thing of beauty. For Musk, when he first was at Tesla, and before he was the CEO, when he was just the executive chairman and basically the finance person funding it, they were outsourcing everything. They were making the batteries in Japan, and the battery pack would be at some barbecue shop in Thailand, and then sent to the Lotus factory in England to be put into a Lotus Elise chassis, and that was a nightmare. You did not have end-to-end control of the manufacturing process. So he goes to the other extreme. He gets a factory in Fremont from Toyota, and he wants to do everything in-house. The software in-house, the painting in-house, the battery. He makes his own batteries. And I think that end-to-end control is part of his personality. I mean, but it's also what allows Tesla to be innovative.
Yeah, I got to see and understand in detail one example of that, which is the development of the brain of the car in autopilot, going from Mobileye to in-house building the autopilot system to
Mhm.
basically getting rid of all sensors that are not rich in data to make it AI friendly, sort of saying that we can do it all with vision. And like you said, removing some of the bolts. So sometimes it's small things, but sometimes it's really big things, like getting rid of radar.
Well, vision only, getting rid of radar is huge. And everybody's against it. Everybody, and they're still fighting it a bit. They're still
Yeah.
trying to do a next generation, some form of radar. But it gets back to the first principles. We're talking about visualizing. Well, he starts with the first principles. And the first principles of physics involve things like, well, humans drive with only visual input. They don't have radar. They don't have LiDAR. They don't have sonar. And so there is no reason in the laws of physics that make it so that vision only won't be successful in creating self-driving. Now, that becomes an article of faith to him, and he gets a lot of pushback. But now, and he's, by the way, not been that successful in meeting his deadlines of getting self-driving. He's way too optimistic. But it was that first principles of get rid of unnecessary things. Now, you would think LiDAR, why not use it? Like, why not use a crutch? It's like, yeah, we can do things vision only, but when I look at the stars at night, I use a telescope too. Well, you could use LiDAR, but you can't do millions of cars that way at scale. At a certain point, you have to make it not only a good product, but a product that goes to scale. And you can't make it based on maps like Google Maps because it'll never be able to, then drive from New Orleans to Slidell where I want to go when it's too hot in New Orleans. Take, for example, full self-drive. He has been obsessed with what he calls the robo-taxi.
Mhm.
We're going to build the next generation car without a steering wheel,
Mhm.
without pedals, because it's going to be full self-drive. You just summon it. You won't need to drive it. Well, over and over again, all these people I've told you about, Lars Moravy and Drew Baglino and others, they're saying, okay, fine, that sounds really good, but, it ain't happened yet. We need to build a $25,000 mass market global car that's just normal with a steering wheel. And yeah, he finally turned around a few months ago and said, let's do it. And then he starts focusing on how's the assembly line going to work? How are we going to do it? And make it the same platform for robo-taxi so you can have the same assembly line. Likewise, for full self-drive, they were doing it by coding hundreds of thousands of lines of code that would say things like, if you see a red light, stop. If there's a blinking light, if there are two yellow lines, do this. If there's a bike lane, do this. If there's a crosswalk, do that. Well, that's really hard to do. Now he's doing it through artificial intelligence and machine learning only. FSD 12 will be based on the billion or so frames
Mhm.
from Tesla each week of Tesla drivers and saying, what happened when a human was in this situation? What did the human do? And let's only pick the best humans, the 5-star drivers,
Mhm.
Uber drivers, as Elon says. And so that's him changing his mind and going to first principles, but saying, all right, I'm even going to change full self-driving so that's not rules-based. It becomes AI-based. Just like ChatGPT doesn't try to answer your question, who are the 5 best popes or something, by study. ChatGPT does it by having ingested billions of pieces of writing that people have done. This will be AI, but real world, done by ingesting video.
Sometimes it feels like he and others, they're building things in this world successfully, are basically confidently exploring a dark room with a very confident, ambitious vision of what that room actually looks like. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like they're just walking straight into the darkness. There's no painful toys or Legos on the ground. I'm just going to walk. I know exactly how far the wall is. And then very quickly willing to adjust as they step on the Lego and their body is filled with a lot of pain. What I mean by that is there's this kind of evolution that seems to happen where you discover really good ideas along the way that allow you to pivot. Like, to me, since since a few years ago, when you could see with Andrej Karpathy the software 2.0 evolution of autopilot, it became obvious to me that this is not about the car. This is about Optimus, the robot. This is like, if we look back 100 years from now, the car will be remembered as a cool car, nice transportation, but the autopilot won't be the thing that controls the car. It will be the thing that allows embodied AI systems to understand the world. So broadly. And so that kind of approach, and you kind of stumble into it. Will Tesla be a car company? Will it be an AI company? Will it be a robotics company? Will it be a home robotics company? Will it be an energy company? And you kind of slowly discover this as you confidently, uh, like push forward with a vision. So it's interesting to watch that kind of evolution, as long as it's backed by this confidence.
There are a couple of things that are required for that. One is being adventurous. One doesn't enter a dark room without a flashlight and a map, unless you're a risk taker, unless you're adventurous. The second is to have iterative brain cycles where you can process information and do a feedback loop and make it work. The third, and this is what we failed to do a lot in the United States and perhaps around the world, is when you take risks, you have to realize you're going to blow things up. First 3 rockets, that the Falcon rockets that Musk does, they blow up. Even Starship, 3.5 minutes, but then it blows up the first time. So I think Boeing and NASA and others have become unwilling to enter your dark room without knowing exactly where the exit is and the lighted path to the exit. And the people who created America, whenever they came over, whether the Mayflower is refugees from the Nazis, they took a lot of risks to get here. And now I think we have more referees than we have risk takers, more lawyers and regulators and others saying you can't do that, that's too risky, than people willing to innovate. And you need both. I think you're also right on 50, 100 years from now, what Musk will be most remembered for besides space travel is real-world AI. Not just Optimus the robot, but Optimus the robot and the self-driving car. They're pretty much the same. They're using GPU clusters or dojo chips or whatever it may be to process real world data. We all got, and you did on your podcast, quite excited about large language model, generative, predictive text AI. That's fine, especially if you want to chit chat with your chat bot. But the holy grail is artificial general intelligence. And the tough part of that is real world AI. And that's where Optimus the robot or full self-drive are, I think, far ahead of anybody else.